I have a mouth, I have a voice. How am I supposed to put it into the internet? Or how am I supposed to put it onto a computer? Well, that's what the equipment portion is for. So I know that some people are just kind of getting into this for the first time and just kind of want to get their feet wet a little bit. And I also know that other people are like, I want to do this as my career, and I'm super dedicated to it. So I'll be talking about this from a perspective of 3 different price points. So we have sort of like a baseline, this is the barest minimum that you need in order to get sound into a digital medium, all the way up to, I am a home producer and I'm making stuff in my house like Pepper Coyote. So let's talk about that. So the first level is the bare bones one. Note the lower of the 2 numbers. You really do not have to spend much of anything in order to get your start. Because in this setup, I'm assuming you're doing everything on a smartphone. Now that $15 in this case is being spent on a microphone. Because the microphones on these things are not great. So the way that we do this is we use something called a lavalier microphone, often referred to as a lapel mic or a clip-on mic. And these will plug directly into the headphone jack of your phone. If you're unlucky enough to not have one, it'll still work with an adapter, so it should be fine. They come as cheap as $15. The one that I have is about 22 bucks. Mine is the middle one listed there, the Power Device lavalier microphone. The one pictured is the Rode SmartLav Plus, which is very popular for just a lot of different purposes. It's a good quality one. It does cost a little bit more. You do kind of get what you pay for, generally speaking, throughout this presentation, but at the same time, there is sort of a diminishing returns point, which I will get to later. But so that's kind of the baseline thing. And so you have the lav mic, and it plugs directly into the headphone jack. And I want you to pay attention to the plug. It has 3 black stripes on it. That is a TRRS microphone. That's different from the one on, like you see this one here, which I'm sure all of you can see very well, this tiny little thing that I'm holding up in front of you. It has 2 stripes on it. Not right now. The reason why I bring this up is because the ones with the 3 stripes are specifically designed to work with smartphone headphone jacks. The ones with 2 stripes will not work correctly. So that's like the main thing that you would need to spend money on if you're going with this setup. You'll obviously need something to record into. There are a lot of free sound recorder apps out there. The one that I use on my current phone is called Smart Recorder. I have an Android phone. I'm sure I think they actually have a native one for iPhones. So that's cool. If you feel like spending a little bit more money, you could invest in a digital audio workstation on your phone. I use FL Studio Mobile occasionally. Not only does it allow you to record sound, but it allows you to mix it and produce, you could produce a full-fledged song on the audio workstations on your phone. It's very impressive. There's a lot of different software out there like that, but it is optional. I'm like all over the place this morning. And then you obviously need the ability to hear what you're doing because, again, the speakers on these things are not great, but just use what you have. If you have like basic earbuds, they're fine. One thing I will stress that for this bare bones package, this is mainly useful for people who are doing like basically everything but recording for music. So that would be things like podcasting or dramatic readings or voice acting. Nothing that requires you to be able to hear yourself back because the microphone and the headphones use the same port. So that kind of doesn't work. But this is like the barest bones necessary for you to be able to get voice into digital thing. And indeed, there are a lot of people who do use lavalier microphones into like a smartphone for like, I have a GoPro or something like that, and they want to have a better sound source than the dinky microphone on the GoPro. Yes, what's up?
I use a lavalier mic as well that I installed into it first, and it had select the auto channel in my first. So it plugs into a voice module. So if you want to like do that for live voice acting stuff, then please talk to me because I figured it out.
Yeah, they were talking to me about that on Telegram. It's very impressive. It's a very impressive sounding setup. So more to come there. But yeah, so that's something that you can do. So yeah, and then you obviously need a phone. I'm assuming most people have a smartphone. You'll have a bad time with this if you attempt to do this on the flip phone. All right, so there's that setup. And if you want to, this is the one that I think most people will probably be starting out with. If you kind of want to do this a little bit more seriously, this is a setup that requires a computer. But the main thing that you're going to be spending money on, again, is the microphone. In this case, it's going to be a USB microphone. There are lots of USB microphones out there. I generally don't recommend spending less than $50 on a USB mic because the cheaper, like the really cheapy ones, like I saw one that's like 25 bucks, it sounds like a potato, and it's generally not a good choice. Excuse me. And so the ones, a couple of the ones that I have listed here are the Samson C01U Pro. That is sort of the newer version of the one that I actually got my start on, the C01U. And it's a really good USB mic. You can kick it around. It's very durable, and it just plugs right into your computer. Very easy to use. And then there is the Blue Snowball Ice. They actually have Blue microphones are actually pretty good from like an entry-level recording standpoint. I know a lot of people are big fans of the Blue Yeti. That is a good mic for people who are starting off. I generally consider that mic to be overkill because it is $135 and has a lot of bells and whistles that most people don't need. So if you really want to get like a baseline bare bones start, that round thing over there is probably a better choice.
If you're recording vocal audio for like music, would you recommend? A friend of mine actually recommended the Blue Bird, but I actually already have the Snowball Ice. Or would you say that the Samsung would be better?
And this is going to be the trend for all of this: is use what you have. The best microphone is the one you currently own. So now, if you're in the market to upgrade and you've like, oh, this microphone only gets me so far, and I've sort of reached the limits of what I can do with it, then yes, you can upgrade. But or you should upgrade. But up to that point, like, I've been using the same couple microphones for years now, and I don't really feel a need to do anything different. So, like I said, use what you have. Okay, so microphones. Again, headphones, same as before. Use what you have. Don't feel like you need to buy anything special here. A computer, just use a computer. It needs to have a USB port and a headphone jack. Yay, nothing fancy. As you can see, we're using the image I'm using here is kind of a budget old Dell HP laptop. Don't feel like you need to buy a new computer for this. And then audio software. This is what I want to talk a little bit about. So there are lots of free options for audio software. If you're on a Mac, I do recommend using GarageBand. It is a fantastic piece of equipment. It has lots of really nice options. It's very easy to use. You can make a full-fledged song purely on GarageBand and it'll sound really good if you know what you're doing. So that's a good choice. If you're not on Mac, you can use a couple recommendations are Pro Tools First. That one is also free. It's a little bit more limited than its bigger cousin Pro Tools, but it also doesn't cost $600. So, options. And now I know a lot of people are a big fan of Audacity. I personally feel is a little bit too limited for most applications. Like if you're doing just basic voice acting and just I want to record a sound and apply very simple effects, it's fine. But if you want to do anything more sophisticated than that, I generally recommend a full-fledged digital audio workstation because Audacity, I'm sure as many of you who use Audacity are familiar with, when you apply an effect to the audio in Audacity, it bakes the effect into the audio, and then you apply another one and it bakes it in. And so if you want to change any of those settings, you have to undo them, tweak the setting, and reapply it. And then you have to, and it's like, oh, I accidentally need to change my equalizer. Undo, 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 undo. And then what if you close your project? That stack is gone. With a digital audio workstation, you can apply, remove, reorder, and change effects in real time without needing to do any of that crap. And so the one that I generally recommend for everybody is this, Traction 7. It's fairly, not fairly new, there have been 7 of them, but it's not as well known, but it is a full-fledged digital audio workstation that is 100% free and is pretty good quality. So, would recommend. And then one thing I would like to give a special shout out to is the field recorder. This is a small device that you can just sort of hold and point at a sound source. Indeed, Pepper Coyote used one for his for recording, hit the audio of his set for the Fox and Pepper show last night. Like he literally put it on the camera stand. It's basically a microphone and an audio interface and all that recording stuff in a handy dandy little box that you can carry with you, put it in your pocket if you need to. You don't need a computer, you don't need a smartphone, you don't need anything. Granted, it's kind of hard to like use this for like, I want to record a song, but like if you just want to record a room, that's great. If you want to record a podcast, good choice. Interviews, awesome. Good stuff. That one there that is pictured is one that I recently purchased and I couldn't be happier with it. It's smaller than this. I just love how portable it is. And it's just a bit over $100 for, and it sounds really, really good. And they come at a variety of price points and sizes, all the way up to like $800 for the one that's like this big and it can record 8 inputs at once. So, options. I say that a lot. Yes?
How do you feel about the ones that use like the actual tape recorders? Because I used to use those in lectures.
Yes. Yeah, what was the term for those? Like voice dictation, dictation things. They're fine. They're mainly used for, well, they're best served as they're often used for recording notes, recording verbal notes to yourself, because the microphones on them are not that great, and a lot of them make it kind of hard for you to get the sound out of them. But it depends. If that's what you got and that's what you feel comfortable using, make it work. I'm sure it's fine. Especially the newer ones, they're probably a little bit more flexible. They may have like a removable SD card and then you can put it places. So that's good. Yes?
For something like a portable recorder, would you say that would work well for voice acting, or is that better for instruments and like general things if you're looking for a more clear?
So I mean, as far as clarity goes, like, as long as you're above a certain price point, it is a wash. Within reason. Like most like if it's above like $100 or so, most microphones sound very, very similar, which is to say very, very good, very, very clear. A lot of it comes down to more how you use it, not necessarily the quality of the microphone itself, which I will be getting to. But yeah, to answer your question more specifically, a field recorder like this could work equally well for vocals or for recording instruments. It's a bit tricky just because of like placement, and like if you're recording vocals, you obviously don't want to hold. That's the one thing I will draw attention to about these. If you hold them, you need to keep your hand very, very still, because otherwise you get noises like that. Because like even just gently rubbing your thumb against it, like the reverberations go through the device and you just hear creaking plastic and it sounds awful. So be very, very careful when you're holding one of these. Or just put it on a stand and just don't hold it at all. Alright, and so now for the more expensive one, and this is for like if you want to do like a home studio and want to do something more elaborate, and like I want to do music as my career, or like I want to be Pepper Coyote or something like that. This is the package that you want to look into. Note the bigger number. You can spend as much money on this as you want. You can have a $100,000 mixing console in your house if you so desire. But I'm sure most of you don't want that. And I want to stress that you don't need that. So let's talk about some stuff here. There's going to be a few more things that I'll be covering for this portion than the other ones, because it's a bit more elaborate. A slightly nicer microphone, specifically an XLR microphone. Indeed, these are XLR microphones. The reason why I recommend an XLR microphone as opposed to a USB mic is because of basically flexibility. A USB mic can plug into this, a computer. It can plug into a USB port, and that's it. An XLR mic can plug into everything else: audio interfaces, cameras, mixing consoles, field recorders, guitar pedals. XLR is like kind of the gold standard audio connector because it's very clean, it's balanced audio, so it minimizes noise, and and basically anything that handles audio probably has an XLR port on it. And so, as far as microphones go, you generally follow the $100 rule. You probably don't need to spend more than $100 on a mic. Because basically at that price point they're all relatively the same. They do get better as you go up, but only slightly. There really is a diminishing returns factor going on. And so the ones that I personally use, and this is not to say that you have to use these, but these are ones that I use. And so ones that are in this price point are probably going to be about the same. So I use a Behringer B1 as my main workhorse microphone. It is a condenser microphone. That's the one on the left, and it sounds really good. It's very clear sound, and it works for basically everything that I've wanted to record it with. It sounds nice on vocals, and it comes in like a bulletproof case. And so it's very easy to sort of carry it around. The second one is a Shure SM57. This thing. I actually brought this with me under the assumption that I wasn't going to be able to demonstrate mic placement, so I wanted to have a visual aid. But now that I have my presentation, I can do that much more easily. But at any rate, so yeah, I have my SM57 with me. This one has a windscreen on it, that's why it looks a little bit different. Yeah, as you can see here. This one is a dynamic microphone. It sounds slightly different from a condenser microphone. But they both sound good. It's sort of like, my general rule of thumb is go with the condenser microphone if you want one microphone to use for everything. And if you're the type, it's like, I want to have multiple things and I want to have mic choice, because different mics sound slightly different on different sources. Getting two different types of mics is a good choice. And then the third one I mentioned there is the SM7B. That's a microphone that a lot of famous musicians have used. Back in the day, Michael Jackson used it. More recently, Andrew Huang uses it. It is a bit more of an expensive microphone, but like, again, you can use it for basically everything. So yeah, don't spend too much money on a mic, but like a little bit of a nicer one a decently good mic will get you very far. XLR cables, that's what these things are. I bring this up because most microphones don't come with their own cables, so you're going to have to get them separately. And that's how you get the sound from the mic into your computer. Yay. You probably don't need longer than 10 feet. Like, these are like 25-foot cables, which is a bit excessive for most people's needs. A mic stand. These little guys are great for tables and bad for everything else, unless you want to like sing on the floor. So having a decent microphone stand is very, very helpful. Like, especially one that, like, as you can see, it bends in the middle. That is a boom stand. That allows you to position the mic basically anywhere you want. Like down here to record a kick drum, up here to record someone really tall, and like you can position everything how you want. The one that I put, I don't remember the exact price of that one, but they're generally between $10 to $30. But yeah, that one there is the one that I generally use. So Cool. A pop filter. A pop filter is very useful for preventing plosives from coming into your microphone. They are a fantastic way to sound amateur. And so they also keep the microphone clean. I'm sorry, microphone. But yeah, they're a great way to prevent the blasts of air that come from your face from going into the mic and making awful sounds. And they also help keep you at a reasonable distance. So you put it there. I'll actually be doing mic placement later, so I don't need to get into that now. You also don't need to spend a ton of money on a pop filter. I've seen them as cheap as $5. You can actually make your own if you have an embroidery hoop and some pantyhose, and you can attach it to a wire. That's actually what I did back in the day before I bought my own pop filter. But they're so cheap that it's really not a huge deal to get one of your own. Or you can have if you're doing something that's in a more out in the wild situation, a windscreen on a microphone can also kind of work. A pop filter is a little bit better though, just because it gives more distance from the microphone and is better at blocking plosives. Headphones, again, you got to be able to hear yourself. That's important. These ones I'm specifically recommending because they cover your ears and they prevent the sound from coming out. A lot of cheaper earbuds don't sound isolate as well, and as a result you end up with the sound from your headphones going into your microphone, which is not great. You won't get feedback unless you're cranking it in your head, which would be weird, but it will still color the recording and sound weird. So I do generally recommend ear covering headphones. The ones that I have pictured here, I do use those fairly frequently. They are the MDR 7506. They are not super expensive, but in addition to being good sound isolating headphones, they're also great for mixing. They're very flat frequency response, and I'm able to hear bass a lot more clearly with them when I compare them to my speakers, just because the low end works a lot better. But as you can see from price points, you could spend as much as you want on headphones. Don't feel like you need to break the bank. A computer. Again, have a computer. If you're in the market for a new computer, more RAM, good processor, more USB ports. That's the main things to think about. Yes.
Personally, just because I kind of got lucky because my friend bought it. I use FL Studio, and sometimes I notice that when I'm trying to record vocals for a song, and I'm trying to listen to myself while I'm recording, there'll be a little bit of lag. So do you think that it's a RAM problem? Because I'll speak into the mic, but then I'll hear it maybe a millisecond after.
Don't get ahead of me. I will be getting to that. And indeed, 2 slides. What's up?
You said something, you mentioned sound isolating headphones. Do you think noise canceling headphones would be good in situations like that?
They'd be fine, they're not necessary. And I mean, the main advantage of a noise canceling headphone is that they prevent noise from outside from coming into your headphones. And that's only really a problem if you're recording in a really noisy environment, which I generally don't recommend. So, yes.
What are your thoughts on some of the integrated headsets for gaming that are more upper end than the cheap ones, but still have the integrated headset mic and headphones?
Does it sound good?
I think so.
Then you're probably fine, because that's the general rule of thumb. And I'll be getting to that, but yeah, if it sounds good, it's fine.
Because I have an Astro A50 or something.
Yeah, if it works, I actually got started on a dinky little Logitech headset, and I sounded like a 5 kilobits per second MP3. It was terrible.
So about my rig earlier, I have a speaker that is going to be on the suit, and one of the main issues that I've been thinking about is, this is my first time doing anything related to this, but I already have it all worked out because I talked to people. But the speaker itself needs to be relatively hidden. It's not going to be like Beauty of the Bass, where it's this big speaker directly on front. I'm using small recorded like the kind of Bluetooth speakers, but a higher end quality that can be linked together, so you could have 3 of them playing the same sound simultaneously. If you want to just kind of increase like surround sound as well. But I was wondering if you know any ways that there's something I could put over the microphone that could make it just a tiny bit less visible.
I'm not super familiar with that kind of stuff, so we'll talk more about it after the panel, I think. Cool. So yeah, anyway, getting back to laptops and computers and desktops. Go with what makes sense for you. I have both. Because I'm doing okay money-wise, but if you need a laptop, or if you prefer a laptop, go with that. You don't feel like you need to have a specific type of computer, basically. Or if you like Mac or Windows, doesn't matter, because basically every software works for everything, except for Logic, which only works on Apple computers. Anyway, speaking of FL Studio, I am an avid FL Studio user. So speaking of which, digital audio workstations. So I'm assuming if you're going to be taking this a bit more seriously, you'll probably want to have a digital audio workstation that you're paying for. The cheapest one that I know of is Reaper, and the non-commercial license for that goes for $60. Like I said, you can make a full song with these. I've made lots of music using my version of FL Studio. I have the slightly pricier version that has some extra bells and whistles associated with it, but they have a cheaper, a cheaper recording studio version for $200, or you could spend $600 on our friend Pro Tools. They come at a variety of price points, but they are all very good pieces of software. From an audio quality standpoint, they are all exactly the same, so don't let anybody tell you, oh, your DAW sounds bad. That just means that means they don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, soapbox off. Okay, so last thing, an audio interface. This is the heart of your home studio. This is the thing where the mic goes into your computer and then comes out into your speakers. And this is how you get zero latency, or this is the easiest way to get zero latency. It also allows you to record multiple inputs at once. As you can see, this one here allows you to record 2 inputs at once. I believe, yeah, that's the 2i4. That's my home audio interface. I also have a travel size audio interface, the PreSonus Studio 24C, and you can go like, they get pretty small. I've seen one like even below $100 actually recently. Or you could spend a ton of money and get one with 18 inputs. And I want to record a drum kit and all of my friends and choir. So yeah, there are lots of options. So they definitely go up in price. There is a bit of a difference in audio quality between the cheaper ones and the really expensive ones, but like the jump in price is huge. You're going from like 150 to like 750. So yeah, don't feel like you need to do that. But like the ones that I have, like the Scarlett and the PreSonus, they both sound really good, and especially if you layer in a mix, no one's really going to be able to tell, oh, this was recorded with a budget audio interface. No one's going to be like that, because all they care, that's the thing you have to remember about like all of this. All people care about is the finished product. They don't care what gear you use, what techniques you use. If it sounds good, you're doing the right thing. But yeah, like I said, the main reason why you want one of these is because it allows you to record and hear yourself back with zero latency. It's very, very nice, especially because it, like as you were alluding to, if you speak and it's delayed, then you have that kind of speech jammer effect going on, and it's really hard for you to be able to record correctly. Like seriously, try it. Like put on a set of headphones and play it back and set the delay to like 80 milliseconds. You're gonna be speaking like this all the time. It's ridiculous. I think Brett and Link did it one time. It was funny. Anyway, I'm rambling. I do that so much, I'm sorry. Extras. Acoustic treatment. Not necessary, but nice. Makes your room, basically keeps your room from coloring the sound and helps you like hear, especially the lower frequencies more accurately. And then there's also you can get a set of studio monitors or reference speakers. Those ones pictures are the ones that I use. They're not super expensive. The idea is that they are speakers that are designed to represent the audio as cleanly as possible without coloring and flattering the audio. You have a question. What's up?
Say you're trying to go for like a more garage rock kind of sound. Would you recommend getting acoustic treatments for the room that you're recording in, and then like adding in like some kind of like reverb in post, or would you recommend just having it be natural when you record it, no acoustic as such?
So I generally, it depends on the vibe you're going for. You can do both. I'm not super familiar with garage rock. If one of the tenets of it is that it is recorded in a garage, then record in a garage. But generally speaking, I like to do the post-processing part because that allows me to dial everything in exactly as I like it. So having a clean reference material gives you a lot more options. Cool. All right. So just wanted to remind you that you don't need to break the bank on it. You don't need to have a multi-million-dollar studio like our friend Hans Zimmer here. You don't really have to go that far. You can have a much more meager setup. This is my studio, but you can still produce all the music that you want. Excuse me. Yes.
For something like voiceover work, I've been watching videos and reading some articles, and I see a lot of people recommend maybe recording in a closet or a room where you can put up blankets or something to absorb sound. Do you think that that's important for somebody starting out to be able to have an area that's acoustically dead?
Don't get ahead of me. That is fine. Literally the next slide. All right, so yes, now you have your equipment. Yay! Let's talk about how to use it, because that's the thing. Not everybody, like, you can have great equipment, but if you're not sure how to use it correctly, it's not going to get you very far. So let's talk about that. You start with the room you're recording in. You want to pick the best sounding room that you have at your disposal, if you have multiple rooms to choose from. And not every room sounds great. Did you hear that after the clap? That's called flutter echo. That's a bad thing. If you can avoid a room that has something like that, I mean, this room is actually not terrible. I think that those do count as acoustic treatment, so that helps a little bit. But if you have access to multiple rooms, choose the best sounding one. If you don't, just make do with what you've got. Try to reduce the background noise as much as possible, like move your computer, turn off the fan, make sure your phone is on Do Not Disturb, get rid of any jewelry you're wearing. Actually, this is noisier, so yes. Yeah, don't try not to be jingle jangling while you're recording. It's not a good thing. And then getting to your point, you can spruce up the space you're in. Like putting blankets on the walls, putting mattresses on the walls, being in a room with a carpet, having a bed in the room. You can, if you have a particularly nasty space, you could make your own little isolation booth. You could like buy egg crate foam and put it inside of a box, or if you're feeling particularly DIY, take a chair, flip it upside down, put it on a table, drape a big puffy coat over top of it, put the microphone inside. There you go.
I didn't even think of that.
The other one that I think a lot of people have if they have a bigger house is a linen closet. That is a great choice for a very acoustically dead space if you want to have like an isolation booth without having to spend a ton of money. Because I'm assuming you probably have bed linens or towels or something. That's just all over the walls, and that really helps a lot. So yeah, that is a good choice. Now let's talk about mic placement. So where you put the mic does make a difference. So start out putting the microphone in the center of the room, because that way you're less likely to get weird interference from the walls. If you have a room with a higher ceiling, that is generally a good thing. In the center of the room, away from walls or windows, And you want to position the microphone, as you can see here, at about eye level, pointing like with the grill or the capsule of the microphone pointing at your eyes. And then once you're in position, you point it down towards your mouth, because that way the air from your face holes goes out and down. So by putting it above that, you're less likely to get wind interference, and that is generally a good choice. So like what this is doing right now, I'm like breathing into it, and this is fine for a live situation, but for recording, you want to be more like that. And so that is definitely helpful. And then the pop filter, if you have, you definitely want to have a pop filter. Place it between the microphone and yourself. I'm assuming you're recording yourself. Excuse me. And then make sure it is, I usually use my fist as like a placement, just sort of, so it's not like right up on there, because if it's like right next to the mic, it's not really going to do much of its job as a pop filter, because it only stops so much air. So give it a little bit of space. And then what's next? So that's kind of what it looks like when it is when the pop filter is in position next to the microphone. And then as far as distance from the microphone goes, you could be like way up in there if you want to have like a close, intimate vocal sound. But when you're doing so, you tend to get more spit noises and breathing noises, which is something that is not pleasant to hear. So that's something you have to be very careful about. By contrast, if you're very far away from the microphone, you have to be a lot louder in order for the microphone to be able to hear you. I'm not going to do that much because my voice hurts. You have to be a lot louder, but it can be useful for like if you have to sing or scream very loudly, or if you have a really nice sounding room and you want to let more room sound in. So that's something you can do. But generally speaking, like 8 to 12 inches from the mic is a good rule of thumb. The way that I figure that, and this is going to be different based off of who you are from like a physical anatomy standpoint, is I use my hand. So I put my hand like that on the pop filter, and that is about 8 inches away from the mic. If I splay my fingers out, that is about 12 inches away from the mic. So that gives you a general guesstimate, and that is a nice sort of balance between room sound and direct sound from you. And that also takes into account the other thing that I want to mention, the proximity effect, which is when you do this. In a world where people are using microphones correctly. Did you hear how bassy that was? That's because of the proximity effect. When you eat the microphone, it gets really, really bassy. And so if you want that sound, that's the way to do it. But if you don't want that sound, stay farther away. So that's just something to think about. So yeah, like I said, 8 to 12 inches kind of takes the proximity effect into account in that regard. So just recapping, yes?
If you were going to be close to the mic to record something like that, would you recommend something more akin to like the foam ball on the end of the mic to prevent close-ins?
If you have that, sure, go for it. Yeah, if you have a windscreen, that's fine. If you don't, just be careful and don't like into the microphone. But yeah, it's usually fine. Like, and plus, like a lot of times when people are doing like the eat the mic thing, it's usually with a dynamic microphone, and they tend to be a bit more resilient. Like you can kick this around a bit more, and it's not going to get damaged as easily as a condenser mic. Though condenser mics nowadays are a lot more sturdy than they used to be. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Is like, just basically just be careful, or if you're worried about it, maybe go like this as opposed to like putting your lips directly on it, so that there's less air on there. So yeah, just recap. Stand in the center of the room, in front of the mic. Keep the mic above you, pointing down. Place your pop filter. Find a good distance, keeping in mind how far you want to be and the proximity effect. Checking time. We got 15 minutes. We should be fine. Cool. All right, and so speaking of 15 minutes, you generally want to take about 15 minutes or so to set up your microphone and play around with mic placement each time you record. Because this gives you flexibility, this gives you the ability to discover a new sound that you might not know. It's like, does this sound better than this, or like this, or like this? Yeah, like you can even speak with the mic off axis, and that can create a different sound, and that could be appropriate for what you're going for. Don't be afraid to experiment. Like I said before, if it sounds good, do it. Just a couple other things to keep in mind about recording. Make sure the performer, whether yourself or your friend, can hear themselves. Almost as bad as hearing yourself on a delay is not hearing yourself at all, because it sounds muffly, it sounds weird, and it's just hard for you to be able to really give a good performance if you can't hear what you're doing. Be careful about cables. Don't trip over cables. Just kind of tuck them out of the way. Wrap them around your mic stand so that you're less likely to bump them as you're going along. Because I know, like, sometimes when I'm singing, I tend to get really animated and stuff like that. And so just avoid the tripping hazards. And so mistakes. Sometimes we make a mistake when we're doing a recording. That's normal. We're people. So there are a couple ways to think about that. If you're doing most types of recording, you can just basically, I'm going along doing my thing, and then oops, I say the wrong thing. Back up, and then just sort of re-say the line and keep going until you make another mistake. Back up, re-say the line, blah blah blah, so you get through everything, and then edit out the mistakes in post. That's not that hard. If you're singing, it's going to require a slightly different strategy, because if you do it that way, you're going to take yourself out of the musical flow a lot, and so you're better off doing what I call the full take method, which is where you start at the very beginning of the song, record everything you need you record the entire performance of the song, beginning to end, and then you do that 2 more times, so you get 3 full takes. And then you edit them together in post to make one super recording. And then if you make additional mistakes beyond that, you can sort of punch in some smaller lines here and there. But that is the way to get a good result with minimal effort, because if you do more than 3 takes, your voice is going to start to get tired. You're going to start to get tired, and you're not going to be giving your best. You're not going to be giving your best. And then that's not good. And also editing more than 3 takes is a nightmare, so it's just a lot easier to just have 3. And then clipping, peaking, overloading. When you distort the microphone by being too loud into it. I will not demonstrate that because I don't want to break the speakers. But basically, you've heard it before. If you're being so loud and you're screaming in the microphone and you hear that distortion noise, that's clipping. And there are a lot of instances where you hear clipping even when you're speaking at a normal volume. That's because you have your microphone settings too loud. You see, the nice thing about an audio interface is you can see here, you can see my mouse. It is a good day. This is these 2 knobs, input gain, output gain. So input gain is how loud the microphone is going into the audio interface. You want to have that lower, so that even at the loudest volume that you're performing at, it is not even close to clipping. Then you turn up the output gain, whether that's your headphones or the monitors, in post so that you can hear yourself. So it's quiet going in, loud coming out. Because if it's loud coming in, then it'll be clipping coming out, which is bad. So, yeah, so that's a little thing called gain staging. It's just making sure that, at each point, it is not too loud that it clips whatever it's going through. Okay, so before I move on to mixing, this part will be pretty quick. Are there any questions?
How important would you say something like a shock mount is?
Nice to have, not necessary. If you have one, yay, they're good. Don't feel like you need to buy one. Any other questions? What's up?
Something that, because I used to be in a band in middle school, the actual program. And something one of the teachers told me was that it's better to wrap mic cords around your elbow. Is that true?
No, do not wrap mic cords around your elbow. That's how you wrap power cords. Microphone cords are very sensitive because of especially XLR cables. You might not have been using XLR cables, so like if you have like an unbalanced like guitar jack, that doesn't matter as much. But like an XLR cable, like these, do not wrap them around your elbow. So it's like there's a specific wrapping technique for it, and I don't have one handy to show you, but you can Google it, like how to wrap an audio cable. It's basically you have it here, and then you wrap, and then you wrap, and then you wrap, and then you wrap. The reason why you do it that way is because A, they're designed to wrap that way, they're designed to spiral that way. B, it makes it really easy to unfurl them later, and C, it minimizes the likelihood that you will damage the cable, because the way that these audio cables are set up is that there's basically multiple wires in there that are crisscrossing together, and if those get bent or damaged as a result of improper wrapping, then you'll end up then the cable won't do its job and there will be noise in it. So be very, very careful with that. So good question. That's something that a lot of people don't know, is like how to wrap cable. So, and I actually didn't know how to do it until fairly recently, so I shouldn't be talking. Anyway, so mixing. So the first part of mixing is not even really mixing, it's audio editing. You're getting rid of the junk in the audio file. It's very similar to like editing video, like anybody's ever used Premiere or Sony Vegas or something like that. You're basically cutting out pieces of the audio and moving the track around to make it all line up, or just getting rid of the noise. Like if you bump your microphone, or if you make a stray plosive, or if you make a mistake or something like that, or if the interface goes or something, you need to edit those pieces out. And then if you're doing something like a podcast, avoid dead air. Avoid pauses for longer than like 1 or 2 seconds, because otherwise people will, those pauses are very, very distracting. Because like people are listening along and then just silence in your podcast, people will think, oh, did my thing pause? Did it break? Is it buffering? No, they just stopped talking, and it sounds really weird. And if you need to re-record something, re-record it. It is way easier to re-record something than it is to try to fix it in post. It's like ounce of prevention, pound of cure kind of thing. And so here's an example of an audio track that has been edited. As you can see, there are little gaps in there between the sections that I sort of pulled them together and minimize the air. This is what I use for like editing the background audio for my videos. And so there's that. Level balancing. This is the most important part, and this is probably the one that most people are familiar with. It's like if you have more than one audio source, make sure they are in the right volume relative to each other. If you have just like one thing, just make sure it's decently loud. But like if you have, like say in a podcast, you have multiple vocals, make sure that they are reasonably balanced with each other. If you have a podcast, please, for the love of God, make sure your intro music is the same volume as the rest of the audio, because I have run into issues where the intro music is one thing and then everyone else is really quiet, and then when the outro music comes on, it's really loud, and then it's really distracting and terrible. So yeah, don't do that. Just make sure, and then like obviously in like a song, make sure everything is balanced appropriately. That makes a bigger difference than many people realize. So as you can see here, here's a fairly complicated looking mixing setup for a song that I'm still working on. Actually, I need to get to that one. As you can see, everything is sort of specifically set to specific volume levels relative to everything else. You're doing this ultimately by ear, though. So don't think it's like, oh, this needs to be set to 75% and this instrument needs to be at 50%. It's all based off of what you hear. So that's level balancing. EQ and compression. I'll go through these two fairly quickly because they're both somewhat complicated. Double checking time. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. We should be fine. An equalizer, or an EQ, is basically like if you've ever seen your car stereo, boost the lows, boost the mids, boost the highs, move things up and down like that. An equalizer in a digital audio workstation is much more sophisticated than that. Instead of having 3, they usually have something like 5 or 7 or 10 bands that you can move around. You can make them as wide or as narrow as you want. You can move them left and right in the frequency spectrum, as you can see here. This is an example of an equalizer in my audio workstation, and this is an example of an EQ curve that I use for vocals. As you can see, there's not a lot going on. Vocals, generally speaking, need very little in the way of EQ. So, like, unless you have like a particularly damaged recording and you need to really tweak some stuff, most of the time you don't need much. I will draw your attention to 2 pieces. One is that small dip. What that is, just like if you have kind of a little boxiness around the that's usually around the 400 hertz range. If you put a small dip there, that can help fix that. That's a very common problem if it sounds kind of like boxy. But audio, fuzzy language, buzzwords, doesn't mean anything. Anyway, the one that is most important though is that cliff on the left-hand side. That is called a high-pass filter. That is designed to roll off any low frequencies that are largely unnecessary for the vocal. So that's something like truck traffic going past, a stray plosive, breath sounds. Most vocals don't have anything going on below 100 hertz. So this is a very easy way to get rid of that noise, and this will help clean up a lot of extra noise in your mix. And then compressors. Compressors are basically an automated, yes, I'll be done in a minute, are basically automated volume control that sort of is used to make the quiet parts of your audio louder and make the louder parts quieter so that the overall volume level is fairly even. I will not go into how to use a compressor here because that's long and elaborate. I have a tutorial about compressors, EQs, and indeed basically everything that I've covered here on my YouTube channel, which I'll be showing the information for in a minute. And then just to wrap up things real quick, don't mix it too loud because it'll cause ear fatigue. Your ears will get tired. You'll make mistakes and it won't sound as good. Take breaks. Go easier on your ears. Compare your audio to something else that you think sounds good. Like if you're making music, compare it to a professionally produced track. If you're making a podcast, compare it to a professionally produced podcast, etc., etc. And if you remember nothing else from this presentation, remember, I've said this multiple times, if it sounds good, do it. That means if you are producing something that sounds amazing to you, you're doing the right thing. Anyway, we're running out of time, so we could probably save questions for, I'll probably be outside if people have other questions. Anyway, that's all I got. Here's my stuff. Feel free to check out my YouTube channel where I have a butt ton of vocal recording tutorials for home vocal recording and for creating vocal special effects. Hit me up on Telegram if you have more specific questions, and same thing on Discord. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope this was helpful for you.
Silver Gato Man, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gato Man, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gato Man, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.